It's the Beaver Banter Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, my co-host Ian Rivers, and Ian, spring sports already seem to be wrapping up. Had a couple of them wrap up their seasons over the last week or so. Let's just start off with baseball because that'll probably be the quickest one to talk about. Nothing really good happening with them. They finished their season, I believe, only coming away with about 3-4 wins. 2 wins. I tried to see this. I try to give him credit, and that doesn't even help him out. Had 2 wins throughout the season. They didn't win a game in the last month to month and a half of the season. Just overall, I mean, there's no other words. It was just bad.
Yeah, their last win was March 26th against Sioux Falls in a 4-1 victory. And their first win of the season came in game 15-ish or so, like something like that, against Malone. And that was an 8-6 victory. So 2-46, the final tally there. That is not fun. That's not tough to, or that's not easy to swallow, no matter how low of expectations you had
Yeah.
for this team this year. But the last weekend of the season, not terrible. They only had 3-game series against Minot State Friday and Saturday, but some of those games they went okay. You know, a 6-1 loss in game one on Friday, and then 6-8 and 8-9 losses. So you would have liked to maybe pull one of those out, especially being at home in Bemidji, but it didn't happen. And mercifully, the baseball season comes to an end.
Yeah, they end it, and so I want to point one thing out here. So the press release from Bemidji State University calls it the Beavers fought hard in a tight Beaver battle. What is the official term? Is it Beaver Bash? Is it Beaver Battle? What do we say when they? I always thought it was Beaver Bash, but what do we got to coin it? We have this opportunity here, Ian. What are we going to? This is an on-air production meeting. What are we going to brand this matchup as?
Well, we've been saying Beaver Bash. I don't know that there's an official term in place. It's just kind of whatever they want to say. But I kind of like Beaver Battle. It sounds a
Beaver
little bit more
Bowl?
menacing, a little bit more rival-like, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I don't know. Maybe Minot State and Bemidji State, like it's kind of one of those forced rivalries in a way where we're not even that close geographically. Like it's just, hey, they have the same mascot, so we're gonna make
Mm-hmm.
it into a fun. So maybe Beaver Bash does fit a little better because it's more of just like a hey, Beaver on Beaver matchup again. So either way, I
Yeah.
don't know. I would have to just say Bash just for that reason, I guess. And it's
Yeah.
what we've been saying.
Yeah, I feel like we'll just probably keep rolling with that. Although Beaver Battle does sound pretty good. So we'll keep it in the vocabulary, in the lexicon here. Yeah, I mean, I've just there's a couple different routes you could go with Bemidji State, but in that final game, where Bemidji State lost 8-9, they got down 8-1 early. So props to them for trying to come back. But yeah, I think it just goes to show really that the battle with Bemidji State is they just did not. I mean, they couldn't hit, but more importantly, they did not have the pitching to be able to run with a lot of these NSIC teams, and it really showed. I mean, there was games where it's just multiple runs after multiple runs. There wasn't really a stretch where it felt like their pitching kept them in the game at all, and that I think is probably, if you're looking at like, holy crap, where do we start for next season? It's figuring out how to bring in better pitching or how to best maximize the pitchers you have there, because you're not going to win with the situation like that.
Yeah, you look up and down the schedule, and there's not a lot of games under 10 runs. These three against Minot State, they were, yes, but then you go 24, 13, 10, 10, 6, 3, but that's Southwest, 11, 11. So there's tons of runs coming in every game. So I think that's a great place to start is hopefully find some pitching because I think if anything, you're going to want to be able to keep games close defensively. And then, every once and then when the bats do pop off, maybe we don't lose 8-9 because we only let in 5 runs in that game.
Yeah. It's one of those adages. So when I do high school sports and I go talk to a coach before the game and say, "So how's your team feeling this year?" They'll always look at me and some of them will say kind of something generic along the lines of, "Well, we can't field, we're having trouble hitting, and we're having trouble catching the ball, pitching the ball as well." And it's like, so really nothing. Like this is basically the gist. And then you'll all of a sudden, then you'll double check and look at their team's record, and they're like 12-4, and they're gonna beat the snot out of the other team 8-3. This is basically the same. Like they haven't been able to hit, they haven't been able to pitch, they haven't been able to do much of anything right this season. So I'm not trying to dog on them, but man, it's not. There's really no other way to talk about them more without it being a kind of a struggle to win 2 games. So we'll see what happens. I mean, there's going to be part of it's just what we've talked about before. It's just the culture of Bemidji State baseball. There is no culture. Like it's that's not to say that there hasn't been good players that have gone through this program. There have been, but it just overall getting a good rounded team. And baseball, like football, is one of those sports where you do need a lot of good players around. This isn't basketball where you can just have one good guy on the court and or girl and have him on the court and kind of take over a game. You need 1 through 9 to be able to be playing well. And even then past the 9, you need good pitching around that. So it's hard. I'm not trying to say that it's easy to get a good baseball program together, but it's just been tough considering the factors of Bemidji being I know they're all a lot of Minnesota schools, but there's a big difference in the climate in the springtime, especially in that March and early April. There's a huge difference between Bemidji and Mankato.
Yeah, it's like 250 miles maybe of
Mm-hmm.
distance between those two cities, and then you look at like St. Cloud State as well, Southwest Minnesota State. All these teams, they're a little bit further south than teams at the bottom of the conference, like Minnesota Crookston maybe. Well, I actually don't know Crookston. Maybe they do have a
They're
good
doing they're
baseball
doing a
team.
little bit better, Crookston
Yeah,
is.
yeah. So Crookston, that was a bad example.
They
But
have Crookston has the Dykoff brothers, and that's just a little bit unfair. Those guys are good.
right. So we've hit home all the logistical problems that Bemidji State baseball has and the hoops they have to jump through. It's going to be an uphill battle, but hopefully next season can bring more than 2 wins.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a high bar, but if they can clear it, I think we'll be happy. So let's talk softball because they had their conference tournament, first time making the conference tournament in about 5 years. They got back in. It was we talked about what it was going to take for Bemidji State to beat, of course, Minot State, as we talk about them in another Beaver bash. We talked about that it was going to be a good pitching matchup and there's going to be a low scoring affair. And it did end up being that. And the game even went to extras, Ian.
Yeah, Bemidji State, man, they were really close to pulling this one out. You were left a little bit just like heartbroken after the game because you thought for the whole time. I thought the whole time I'm like, okay, they got this in the bag. And I say that like it was a 10-1 lead. It was 1-0. Bemidji State scored in the top of the first and held that lead at 1-0 until the bottom of the 7th inning, which of course in softball is the final inning. And then a 1-out hit drives in a run and it's tied. Then you go all the way to the 11th inning. Bemidji State scores again at the top of the inning. And it just seemed like every time you thought Minot State was down, they were never out. They got 2 runs in the bottom of the 11th and won the game 3-2. So it definitely a tough way to lose that first game. And you never know what would happen if they do win that first game. And we talked a lot about Duluth and the potential matchup with them. That was wrong. It's just another thing we didn't know about the conference tournaments. They reseed that tournament. And so we would have gone on to play Augustana had we won and not Minnesota Duluth being the lowest seed. But either way, you never know what would have happened in those games. I know that Augustana did not fare particularly well. I think they pulled out the win in their first game, but it was a struggle for them. I think they did it kind of the same way against St. Cloud State, where they just kind of, or no, that was their second game. Concordia St. Paul, 8-7. I think that was kind of a bottom of the inning, barely pulled it out by the skin of their teeth thing. But So we lost the first game going to the losers bracket, and then you have a Minnesota State matchup, and you take one of those big cartoon-like gulps because we know that the record against Mankato this year was not very pleasant. And I didn't even know anything about the history of the series. I just knew that the two games we lost by a combined 17 runs, that we played them in the conference matchup earlier this season. But I knew that we could probably compete with them. You know, it's a tournament atmosphere. And they got up to a 4-0 lead, did the Mavericks. And it was a little bit dicey. You were worried. And then the bats just got hot in the fourth inning and just took off from there. I mean, it was a fun game to watch after that, because the Beavers were hitting everything, it seemed like, and they ended up winning 9-4. And I have it with me here. I There was no graphic that was thrown up, so this might not be 100% accurate, but I think it is. I tried to copy it down as the guy was saying it. Mankato's last loss to Bemidji State was in 2001 in the conference tournament. This is now Bemidji's second all-time win against Mankato.
Oh
All
my,
time.
oh my gosh.
They were 1-37 against Mankato coming into this game. I had no idea anything
No
about
idea.
that. And so the stakes, I would have been a little bit more like crestfallen and been like, oh, well, another matchup against Mankato. Here we go. But yeah, I mean, they pulled it off, and that's a fantastic way to do it. And to advance, like we said, that was what we wanted. Just win one game and get to day two. And they did that. And, day two did not go quite as well as they would have hoped. A 3-11 loss in just 5 innings against Concordia St. Paul, who was, I believe, the 9 seed. And so that was a little bit of a disappointing way to go out, I'm sure. Maybe there was some of a little bit of a celebratory hangover, an emotional hangover.
Might have just
I
been
don't
you
mean to
used
say
up
that
all
they
your
went out and,
bullets to try
yeah,
and get to the
exactly.
next round.
Exactly. And they did. They pitched a lot of innings. Damro was in the circle, not on the mound, in the circle for a lot of innings in those first two games. So it's tough. It's tough. And, it's a tough way to end the season, but I think there's still a lot there to be excited about, especially given the team that you beat in the conference tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that no matter what, you can at least take the feather in the cap on that one that you beat Mankato. Oh my goodness. But going back to that first game, Ian, against Minot State, you talk about a 1-0 lead being a hard lead to protect, and that's a hard lead to protect in baseball. But in softball, I mean, the bases are smaller, the field's more packed in, the ball is bigger, the bats are longer. It's a lot harder to hold down a 1-0 lead in softball than it is a 1-0 lead in baseball. But we knew that it was going to be a tight pitching game going into it. So it's not that the bats necessarily froze up for Bemidji State. 1-0 win might have been their path forward. And the one run might have been the only run they were expecting to get in that ball game. But it's just a tough one for them to lose that one late. And like you said, going into extra innings as well, kind of wore them a little thin for the rest of the tournament, especially for it to happen right in that first game and then have to play another game that day. They did beat Mankato, of course, and that's great. And then it just, my guess, without, looking at things too, under the microscope, kind of just sets you back and burns you a little bit for the second day. But overall, I mean, I would consider this in year 2 of Coach Peterson. I would consider this a win. I would consider this a good season. I would consider this a good tournament. And it's a nice thing to build off of and a good thing to kind of push this program forward underneath the new head coach, now 2 full seasons under her belt.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is a great season considering where they were last season, considering they hadn't made the conference tournament since 2017. Very good result.
It's a long time ago. I was a freshman the last time they made the NSIC tournament. That's a long time.
It was. Yeah, I was talking to my brother because I had sent him a photo on Snapchat, and he was like, "Is it the NSIC tournament?" Because he goes to an NSIC school at Moorhead. He's graduating 2 days from now, so congratulations to him. I know he doesn't listen. Good for us, my little brother. But anyways, he was mentioning that it was Moorhead's first time since I believe 2010 making the conference tournament. So there must be not very much parity in the tournament if there's two teams like us that just can't get in for 6 years at a time. But hopefully Bemidji State's here to stay. And I did want to give you credit. You were the one who said Minot State Bemidji State would be a very low scoring affair, and that it was. It took 11 innings to get more than 2 runs on the board total. So
Yeah, I did not predict the extra innings. That would have, if I would have done that, I would be buying lottery tickets at this point, but I was not that close. But yeah,
yeah,
at least got a little bit. So anything else with softball, Ian, you want to touch on? Or are we calling it a season with the baseball and softball programs?
I think we're wrapping it up for those two programs. Just want to say congrats again to the softball players and Coach Peterson on a fantastic season, and hopefully it doesn't stop there. There's more room to grow still, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. So Ian, what else is going on in the spring sports realm for Bemidji State?
Well, we're looking at track and field and golf for the only two remaining sports we have left in play. Track and field, there was a couple of headlines from this last weekend. Doss wins shot put. I am blanking on her first name, Tierra. Tierra Doss wins shot put. This is courtesy of bsubeavers.com, saving her best throw for last, reaching 46 dash 5.25 for a new PR and improved provisional. Jeez, that's a lot of V's. But yeah, so a good result there for Doss and the team. And then they competed in the NDSU tune-up, and I think they had several top fives there individually. And so all that's left for them, well, maybe not. There's the NSIC Outdoor Track and Field Championships this weekend, and then the NCAA Outdoor National Championships are in a couple of weeks. And we've been talking, we don't really know exactly who goes to those, if there's just individual Beavers that could potentially qualify for either of these tournaments. I can look into quick the conference if you have anything to say about track and see who is competing for the conference.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of track, I don't have too much. And we talked about with the separate meets. Sometimes it just depends. Sometimes you take all of your distance runners, or you just take your runners in general. You take them to one meet, and then there's another, and you take all your field athletes, and you go in a different meet there. So that might kind of be the reason for the split up there. But I mean, overall, getting towards the end of that season, as we've talked about before, it doesn't really matter what the team does overall because it's such an individualized sport. Anybody having a good day can advance and have a good postseason run. So, Ian, anything?
No, I cannot find a thing on this. And I looked before the show started, before we started recording, and I've been looking at the NSIC page. Can't find anything about any Beavers that are running in it. It's not even on the NSIC schedule for track outdoor events, which I don't know. Excuse me. If there's anything, we will bring it to you next week on what will be, spoiler alert, our final show. We'll touch a little bit more on that as we wrap up this week's show, though. Men's golf, however, does have a couple of headlines. We'll read those first, and then we can get into what they have coming up this weekend. Coach Miller of the men's golf team was selected NSIC Coach of the Year.
All
Ekron
right.
Miller and Rylan Petrie was named first team, and Ben Corbett second team, all NSIC for the golf. So very good. I mean, we've known for a while that this men's golf team has been stirring up positive headlines, and we've been slowly throwing them more and more attention and coverage over the course of the spring. And they've come through. I mean, they've had a fantastic season so far.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go up to Bemidji State last week. Had to for the high school I'm calling, Wadena Deer Creek. They were playing Bemidji High School, and of course they play other games at BSU. And so I went up to go call the game. And honestly, I should have just got there, and I should have just drove right over to the country club and brought my club because after all, Bemidji State is a golf school now. So I am fully ready to embrace it. I think students are encouraged instead to have backpacks. They're encouraged to have their club bags and get the ones on wheels, and they can just wheel them around campus. And I think that's the new way to go at Bemidji State University. And I, for one, am here for it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been we've covered Bemidji State athletics in the past on KBSB, and most of the time there's not much positive headlines to come out of the spring. I think most people that listen to this show understand Bemidji State athletics in the spring, not their strongest season, but this has been a pleasantly surprising season so far for these programs. I mean, this is the most positive headlines I've seen in one spring, and I think it's a very good thing for the school as a whole. And I think you probably should look at how good the fall sports have been doing, two of them at least. And hockey has been up and down, but they've made an NCAA tournament
Mm-hmm.
recently. They won a conference championship within the past 7 years now. So, I mean, look at the success that all the other programs bring, and that does help build up your lesser programs that maybe are not quite as known about. I guarantee you there's some sort of correlation there with how good, especially football and soccer, have been, and to now the improvements in men's basketball, softball, and men's golf.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned men's hockey, you mentioned men's basketball. We'll get to and women's soccer as well. We'll get to some of that in a second here, but Ian, let's wrap things up with golf. What's next for the golf team? What's their schedule look like?
Well, this weekend, May 11th through the 13th, which is Thursday through Saturday, they will be in Winona at the Bridges Golf Club competing in the NCAA Super Regional. And I don't really know what to expect out of this. They had a super regional preview all the way back September 6th and 7th, and they finished 9th out of 14 and 11th out of 14 in those two tournaments, or in those 2 days of that preview tournament. And that was, of course, at Winona. So they have played this course before. Hopefully that means that they can improve. And yeah, I mean, I have no expectation. I really don't. I don't know what any of the other golf programs look like. I don't know how we stack up against some of these other programs, but I'm just looking for them to make some sort of take something positive away from this. Obviously, it's already positive. You're already there. You won the NSIC championship. It's not a bad season if you go in here and just flop completely, but just take something away from it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're already playing with house money. Just keep it rolling. Nothing but good vibes when you're down there. Should be a beautiful weekend down in Winona. So a good opportunity for Bemidji State University to make some waves on the NCAA tournament level. Hey, Ian, I know we're going to talk with schedules here with the women's soccer, men's hockey stuff, but there's one quick note that I want to bring across your desk here because just announced earlier this afternoon, before we started recording here, men's basketball has officially announced, so the university can officially announce a couple commitments for men's basketball, and a couple Minnesota commits here. John Pekarich of Brainerd has committed, and we kind of touched on that back in the winter when he officially when he himself announced on Twitter and made his verbal commitment. But now they can put pen to paper on the signing day stuff. And they also have Job Juneman, Duluth East, made a commitment. So a little bit about Pekarich. He's got a lot of accolades. He's a 6'3" guard, played at Brainerd, so played in a very, very tough conference. And the name of the conference is escaping me, but it's Brainerd, it's Alexandria, it's Sauk Rapids Rice, it's Fergus Falls, it's St. Cloud Apollo, it's St. Cloud Tech. I mean, it's all those St. Cloud schools, it's Bemidji, it's Brainerd. So, I mean, there's some familiarity there with people who follow Bemidji High School. So, Pekarich is a guy who's at least been around this part of the state. And of course, a local guy. It's not that far of a drive, about an hour and a half from Brainerd to Bemidji. So his accolades, he's a first team all conference, a two-time first team MVP with this team, two-time Brainerd Dispatch Player of the Year, Minnesota Basketball Coaches Association All-Star, two-time Offensive Player of the Year. I'm guessing that's with his team, a two-time conference champion. And of course, as we talked about, Ian, just a tough conference that he plays in, or at least a conference with a lot of big schools in the northern half of the state. And during his junior year, Pekarich averaged 18 and a half points, over 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and all that. So these are commitments that will join the Beavers in the 2023-24 season. And then also you have Juneman, who's from Duluth East High School. He's a 6'2" guard. And Ian, the thing that will, I think, be the most enticing about Juneman is his ability to shoot the three ball. Last season, He ranked third in the entire state of Minnesota with over 100 3-pointers made. He made 109 3-pointers last season, and that's going to play well for Bemidji State.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if I'm remembering correctly, that we talked about a little bit of shooting consistency from beyond the arc because they kind of had the mentality of live by the three, die by the three this year. And when it wasn't falling, you saw the Beavers really struggle offensively, at least. And I think that could be something that can help us out a lot in that category, especially is some shooting consistency and bringing in a guy that made 109 in a season. I mean, that's probably about 3 a game if I'm estimating the amount of games that a high school program plays. I
Yeah,
think that it's
especially a
around
program like Duluth
30-ish.
East. I'm not sure what that number would be for sure, but
Yeah, so it's somewhere around 2.5 to 3 a game. That's still, even if it's two a game is usually pretty good.
and it's nice because you get to steal a player who's a Mr. Basketball candidate and a McDonald's Award semifinalist. So this is a guy who has not a he's not breaking records or anything, but a guy who was put up some nice seasons, and you got to take him out of Duluth's backyard, and you got to get him up to Bemidji, and then also with Pekarich, with Brainerd, that's pretty much a good ground for Bemidji to mine. And for them, for Boshi to get those two guards to add to the team, again, are they going to be blown it away as freshmen? Who knows? Like, who knows what that will officially be once they get on campus and they get into the program and they kind of shuffle themselves around. But a couple nice commitments there. I had the opportunity to see Pekarich play one game. I got to call a Brainerd Warrior basketball game when they were in Sauk Rapids. So it was good score, kind of that gritty point guard. Can kind of do a little bit of everything. So it'll be a big help for Bemidji State. So Ian, let's go into schedules now. Let's talk about men's hockey since we previewed that last week. We kind of said it was going to drop in between our recordings, and it pretty much did like right after. So we know the conference schedule for sure. And then we also kind of know some non-conference here and there. But Ian, what's your kind of view on the schedule here?
Yeah, so the conference schedule dropped, and obviously we know who we play in the conference. We know who the teams in the conference are. So that doesn't really help you outside of, oh, look, we're not playing St. Thomas in the last weekend of the year anymore. It's back to Minnesota State. So we have to start off the year, St. Thomas, Lake Superior State, Michigan Tech, Minnesota State, and that's your October-November series. And then you get into the winter. It looks like the bye weeks will be in maybe January this year, I think, is what Lucas was saying. Which I think is a little bit better, or maybe November. Man, I can't remember what he said, but either way, it's a better bye week to have than we had last season. I think ours last season was like stupid early. Um, the other notable thing is Augustana is, of course, going to play each team in the conference once. At home, or for Augustana will be on the road, so we'll play them at home here in Bemidji. That'll be February 2nd and 3rd, and those games at the Sanford Center, of course. And then, yeah, not much else to note in the conference schedule world. We only play Bowling Green once. We only play Northern Michigan once, I believe, are the two teams, because I think there's two teams now that we only play once, and it's Northern Michigan and Bowling Green, and that's kind of a good thing if you want to talk about like where we project these teams to be. Those are two teams that could very well end up in the top 3 next year, and to avoid some of them, that might be a little bit easier to creep into the top 3 ourselves, potentially for next season. And then, like you touched on, we do know a little bit of the fill in the blank games. We know we're on Duluth's schedule. They dropped their full schedule, and we are on there. I believe that's October 20th and 21st. And then we play the Icebreaker tournament. We co-host that with North Dakota. So that should be, I believe, the first weekend of the season, probably before that Duluth series. And that will be hosting Army and Wisconsin. I'm not sure in what order, but those will be the two teams along with North Dakota that's in the tournament. And then other than the COVID year, where we didn't play anybody outside of the WCHA, I have not known a year that we have not played North Dakota. So I expect them to be on the schedule. And then I believe that only leaves us one weekend left to fill, and our friend Lucas from Beaver Territory believes that it will be another home and home with St. Cloud. So
Okay
that's
with that.
kind of what we're looking at for filling in the blanks with most of this schedule. And I guess we'll go from there. We've previewed what we think might happen for the Beavers next season, and we will obviously touch more on that next season as the year rolls around. Yeah, I don't have much more to say on the schedule other than we know when we play each conference team. Them dropping a conference schedule doesn't really help me at all because I know
You're
who's in the conference.
right. You already knew who they were going to play. I guess, now you can, get ready to decide which games you want to go to and stuff like
If
that.
you're gonna plan any road trips, exactly. That's more what this is for. Like maybe somebody takes the yearly trip down to Mankato because they live close or something like that. So this is probably good for those people that want to go on road trips and get scheduling in order for those weekends.
Mhm. I will say, I mean, I know it's not 100% confirmed, but it's pretty much confirmed their non-conference schedule. And I think this is an opportunity where kind of Bemidji State never has a great non-conference schedule, but it's never, I mean, Bemidji State can always be better, but I never think it's a true knock against Bemidji State for their subpar non-conference schedule because they play one of the tougher non-conference schedules in terms of just overall in college hockey because it's all the Minnesota schools playing each other. And I mean, it's never going to be the old WCHA, but also at the same time, it's the closest we get. And it kind of sucks you right back into college hockey because the rivalries get you right back in when you can play St. Cloud State, when you can play UND, when you can play when you can play UMD. There's some of those schools where you don't necessarily get that when you're playing, when you're going across to play. Arizona State's a cool matchup, but if you're, playing Quinnipiac or something, maybe and this year isn't the year to pick Quinnipiac, but, in years past, you pick them to get the win, but also at the same time, it does make the games more exciting. And even though you don't win them all, it's a good way to kind of throw you right back into the fire and get you ready for the season.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And you said non-conference schedule both times, and I was very confused because I'm like, I feel like normally they do play a pretty tough non-conference schedule, but I think you were referring to their conference schedule where it's not the CCHA. It doesn't have the national respect, and so they get
Yeah.
they get hammered on a little bit for that. And you're right, they do usually play a pretty tough non-conference schedule. The problem is Bemidji struggled to win a lot of those games, and even if they do, they can't really stack them up and
Yeah.
combine good non-conference with good conference seasons. It seems like it's always one or the other. I believe the season we won the CCH or the WCCHA, we did not win a single out of conference game. We got swept by Duluth, and even Princeton came in the low 30s or high 40s, I believe, in the pairwise and swept us on our home ice. So definitely not ideal. But there is a little bit more to touch on with hockey. The Beaver captains were announced for 2023-24, and some big news out of left field. Kyle Loft and Carter Jones will be apparently returning for their extra years of eligibility. They've both been named, or
Do they
Kyle
still
Loft
get
has been
COVID
named
years?
captain. What's that?
Do they still get COVID years?
Yes, there are still COVID years floating around. I
Still?
believe I believe this or next year. So I think seniors that are becoming seniors, and I think Lucas knows this for sure what year it stops, but I think there's still two classes left now that can do it. And it's
Yeah.
it's crazy, man. But yes, Loft and Jones. Loft will be the captain, and then the alternates will be Carter Jones, Eric Martin, and Jackson Judding. So that's your list of captains. And I kind of like getting Kyle Loft back. I mean, neither of these guys were like A plus performers. Carter Jones had his weekends where he did really well offensively. And of course, Loft, dubbed the Maverick Killer by our friend Chase on Twitter. And he's absolutely correct. They two overtime game winning goals, and they're both from the Mankato
Make him a
native
Beaver for
himself, Kyle
life.
Loft. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts to get these guys back. It's definitely going to shove some of those freshmen who we were maybe excited to see down the depth chart, and it gives them a little bit less ice time now on both units because that's one extra defenseman and forward coming back. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be the worst thing for the school to have those guys back.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it just kind of helps give you that added depth. And if those guys really do play well, those younger guys, because it's the side of the coin. Like, do you want to give them ice time because it's like, well, they've had a year, they need to grow. And the flip side is like, well, yeah, but like, do they also kind of need to earn it? And, like, you don't want to just shove them in there because what happens if they don't quite reach the potential and then you're kind of stuck with, some guys who have pretty hard ceilings. But I mean, yeah, overall, it's not bad to have good players back in your program. So, Ian, one more thing. Let's wrap up women's soccer. Their schedule dropped. What did you see from there?
Well, again, it's kind of the same thing because most of their schedule is conference opponents, but this season only a 14 game conference schedule. Normally it is a 15 game conference schedule. Or wait, 13 game? Is it 14? I thought they said 14. Oh yeah. We do play Minot State in the conference. I was very confused because Minot State, we have a non-conference matchup with them to end our non-conference slate of 4 games. And so I was like, well, maybe they're only scheduling us against every team but one, and Minot State just happened to be the one team on the outside looking in. But no. So again, it's the same thing with hockey. We know who we play in the conference. That doesn't inspire me. But what does inspire me is the news that you are going to be playing Upper Iowa outside of the conference, and there's no Division 1 opponent this year. I double checked Missouri Western State and Rockhurst. Both of those games will be in St. Joseph, Missouri. Those are being played on the same weekend. And both of those schools are Division 2. So there's no, I don't want to call it a guaranteed loss. Obviously, this program has gone out and beaten Division 1 opponents before, but there's no guaranteed loss, and I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see, on this schedule with 2 Division 2 opponents, and then your other 2 games being Upper Iowa, who just left the conference or will be leaving the conference as of May 30th, I believe, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
Minot State, it'll be a rematch of last year's NSIC championship game. And then we'll play them again on October 15th in conference play.
Yeah, I think adding Minot, you talk about the non-conference schedule not being super tough when you look at Rockhurst and Missouri Western State and Upper Iowa, but adding that Minot State non-conference matchup, I think will be huge because it's a team it's a team that you could potentially play 3 times if you talk about the NSIC tournament. So to get another matchup against them is just as good as getting another tough Division 2 opponent. So that'll definitely help out when you look at records at the end of the season. It doesn't push them as one of the toughest strength of schedule, but it kind of beefs it up a little bit. Other than that, yeah, I think it's another good year upcoming for Bemidji State women's soccer. They should be getting a lot of wins next fall.
Yeah, and we'll touch more on that next fall when we return. We're not done yet, though. We have one show left.
One
Next
more.
week, we'll touch on how golf and how the track and field athletes did. And then we will be kind of doing our season finale of season 1 of Beaver Banter. It's been a pretty fantastic year. So you're definitely going to want to tune in for that one next week. It's going to be a lot of fun.
As Vince Carter said, I got one more in me. See you guys next week.